Welcome everyone to our talk on questioning personalization and building better engagement models. We're here to explore how we can create more dynamic, consentful, and reciprocal technology. We'll cover the basics of personalization, and then we'll get into a new concept called consent-based calibration. First, a little bit about where consent-based calibration comes from. And also, hello, let me introduce myself. I'm Kate Lesniak, the Chief Strategy Officer at ThinkShout. My pronouns are they, them, and she, her. At ThinkShout, we advance the causes we love by putting people and the planet first. We believe that effective and efficient technology doesn't have to cost our communities their privacy or personal agency. And we build digital products and platforms for organizations doing good in the world, like the Humane Society and Feeding America. ThinkShout as an agency is doing our best to build great platforms for our clients while we also shift harmful trends in technology. When we're answering questions about changing those trends, we also ask ourselves, why would we change that trend before we ask how we'll do it? That's where consent-based calibration actually comes in. Consent-based calibration came from taking on one of the 8 core challenges that ThinkShout sees ahead of us in tech. And these challenges range everywhere from power consolidation and the decline of the open internet to the standardization of engagement and expectations. There's a more boring internet out there, to justice and inclusion, making sure that the products that we build are built by the communities that they're meant to serve. And also things like the trustworthiness of technology, these huge Facebook questions about what can we trust, what can't we trust, all the way down to what are we prioritizing in funding and who gets to decide what gets funded. In this case, consent-based calibration came from taking on the challenge of digital everywhere. And by that, we mean that, at this point, without a website, does an organization really even exist, especially in COVID times? And without a digital body, does a human even exist? Before we move forward, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what a digital body is. That term comes from the Consentful Tech Project. And these days, they kind of define a digital body as the idea that we both have a physical body that we move through the world, and we also have a digital body that we move through the internet. And digital bodies are made up of pieces of personal data. Like our physical bodies, our digital bodies exist in relationship with others and kind of can also participate in communities. Physical bodies are made up of cells, digital bodies are made up of data and metadata, and everyone has one. So we come to the internet kind of to be entertained by what is fed to us on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, right? But the way that personalization works at this point, the way that we are engaged with as digital bodies, means that our lives often become narrower rather than broader when machine learning kind of serves up the next recommendation. So in the physical world, I'm able to kind of move about and say, this is who I am and this today, and this is who I want to be tomorrow. Today, I need to go for a run, or I need to take my dog for a walk, or I need to bring my neighbor some groceries. But tomorrow I get to be doing something completely different. And on the internet, unfortunately, what we see is a continuation of a more siloed and narrow experience when it's driven by machine learning and AI. The experience that's kind of created by an ambient algorithm also creates kind of a more boring experience, a more kind of standard experience across all digital platforms, rather than kind of a more exciting, engaging, and dynamic experience. And it can also be dangerous. Think about how YouTube radicalized thousands of people by serving more polarized speakers to hold attention, right? And again, the metrics of a successful personalization engine shouldn't be the same measures by which we value our digital experiences, right? So how can we have a more robust understanding of what it means to be a digital body functioning online without allowing a personalization engine to define who we are? The New York Times a couple of years ago did a great project on why personalization has kind of failed us. And it kind of builds on these things that we've already talked about, right? This idea that if we don't get to determine who we are next, rather than just who we've been before, we lose a lot of agency over what our experiences can look like, about what our futures can be. This quote, "Our tastes are rarely simple enough for an algorithm to make sense of. Our preferences about what we like are often arbitrary, disjointed from the logic required for an algorithm to function. These recommendations rarely go past the boundaries of what we already know and enjoy. And that's not usually how we find our next favorite thing. It would be nice if algorithms were more transparent so we could see why they make certain recommendations, right? So this is kind of core to the idea of having agency online. The idea that what I was yesterday doesn't need to be what I am today. And in fact, what I might be excited about is something that you couldn't guess and I couldn't guess based on the data I've already provided you. So ThinkShout has this incredible solution, right? And it's built on all these different ideas from so many different amazing organizations and kind of people who've come before us. And the solution is in response to this question from nonprofits that often come to us and say, we want personalization, but we don't want it to be creepy. And by that, we always understand that they don't want to cross out their own impact, or they don't want to kind of like cross their own values in order to make an impression on visitors to their website. They don't want to have to say, hey, we're going to collect all your data and tell you what you want, which is the same thing that major organizations like major companies do, or Facebook does, in order to provide you with what you need in order to make an impact in the world. We're trying to do good here. We're not trying to kind of further hone in on existing patterns, structural problems. And also organizations don't want to have to manage and protect a ton of data, right? So the other problem with personalization isn't just that it's not effective for users, it's also that the organizations responsible for personalization have to protect a ton of data. And if you have a data breach, you're in a lot of trouble. As we see more regulation coming through, there's going to be higher and higher consequences for what it means to have bad data or to leak that data or get hacked. So in order to come up with something called consent-based calibration, we didn't actually start with the question, how can we make websites that respect users or are not creepy? And instead, we started with a different question, which was a little bit more accessible. We asked, how might we make visiting an organization's website feel more like walking through its actual physical front door? What happens first? Specifically, how can it feel less like people are receiving kind of like this personalized postcard, right? And so this is just like the farthest, kind of the most blunt example I could give, which is a personalized postcard. But you see this all the time with newsletters, like merging your first name, all that kind of stuff. And more like a really delightful experience of walking through a front door and engaging with an actual person. So how can we say things like, oh, hi, it's me, I'm here at your site. I'm ready to engage with you. And I have these questions about who I am and what I'm looking for. And I would like to know what you can offer me. And you actually presented me with something because I made a choice, but that's not what I wanted, right? And this is the third step here, the one that Ronnie is representing from Schitt's Creek, is where we see the biggest problem, where you can't pivot away from what you've already said you were interested in order to see what you might want next when machine learning is driving your experience. So consent-based calibration then is this idea that there are three components to controlling your own experience on an organization's platform. Being able to say hello, being able to ask a question and say, I'm interested and curious about this thing. And then again, being able to say, no, that's not for me. What else can you show me? I've changed my mind. Again, most importantly, it allows you to have a different motivation or even be in a different mood the next time you come back. Really specifically, we want to define consent-based calibration as a concept and approach rather than a very specific user experience or output. We say that it has three different components. First, consent-based calibration is a lightweight, persona-driven, and browser-based alternative to personalization. And when we say browser-based, we mean that we're not storing a bunch of data about what a user has done on your site and dumping it into their profile in your CRM. Instead, we're allowing that user to come back and be someone new next time. We can still offer an experience to them by saying, hi, here's what we can offer. We can offer you information as an activist or as a journalist or as a person who wants to make change in your community, right? This is like a persona-based experience rather than we're going to guess what you might want based on the clicks that you've already brought here. The second is that it allows users to determine and shift that identity in relationship, right? So if I've said as a user, okay, I see what my choices are on this site. I can interact with it as a journalist or as a citizen or as a student or whoever. Well, actually, what you're giving me based on what you think my profile is isn't what I need. And so I'm going to shift over to this other motivation, which is that I need to understand breaking news, or I need to understand the most important data on the situation, right? Based on a persona. And the third assumes that a person would like to actively participate in creating their own experience, right? So it's ongoing. It's not just one time I ask, and the next time I feel like, okay, I could just move on because I'm not getting what I need. It's actually, I've asked, I didn't get what I needed, and over here, I'm going to move into a different experience entirely, an experience that is entirely different. So we replace this idea of, do you consent, this GDPR or the privacy banner that everybody sees now, which is, do you consent to us collecting your data to provide you with an experience that we define for you behind the scenes, to an ongoing conversation of, are you interested in interacting with our site in one of these typical patterns, right? The journalist or the student or the educator or whoever it is, or you can even be motivated by a question, like I'm looking for, articles, or I'm looking for on elephants, or I'm looking for something that's audio focused or whatever it is. So to this ongoing conversation of, are you interested in interacting with our site in one of these typical patterns? Okay, maybe this typical pattern didn't fit you. How about now? So a couple of different things that we're excited about is that consent-based calibration shows up in all different kinds of ways, right? It's an approach rather than a specific user experience. And no surprise here, we see consent-based calibration show up in ways like this. This is the ACLU's homepage, which makes clear its issue taxonomies and presents a clear pathway named for visitors on its homepage, right? So essentially, the ACLU is saying, hey, we work on all these different issues. What are you interested in? We can offer you these. And once you click on one of these taxonomy tags, which are really kind of clearly laid out, you're able to then dive into a deeper experience, right? So in this case, I clicked on human rights, and I'm now able to go into an idea of, okay, I care right now about human rights. I want to look at what's at stake. I want to see current issues, and I want to see the latest, or I want to act, right? So I'm able to kind of dive in, kind of whittle down what my experience might be, and then kind of come back out. You notice that my main navigation is still the same. Things have not changed drastically. This is a basic of consent-based calibration. Here's what we can offer you. It's very clear. Go ahead and narrow your own experience. Another great example is from the Smithsonian Learning Lab. And we love this because they use verbs, right? Discover, create, share, learn. And what we see here is that they're using motivations to allow visitors to decide what they're looking for today. And once you click on one of these, you actually drop down the page. That was the Smithsonian Learning Lab's homepage. But you actually drop down the page to see that there are collections that you can annotate yourself, you can copy, you can upload your own resources, and you can download quizzes and assignments, right? So we're seeing this ability to use tools to create my own experience again. So this is another tenet, right, that we're seeing from consent-based calibration. You can curate your own experience, you can use tools to customize your own experience, and you can kind of say, okay, my motivation today is to create, tomorrow it might be to explore. Another great resource that we see is this idea of centering your content strategy around questions. This is Stanford's Civic Online Reasoning curriculum, and it comes out and says, basically, we're focused on answering 3 questions here. Our entire content strategy is based on the questions of who's behind information, what's the evidence, and what do other sources say? And what happens when you click on one of these 3 items is you bring a full experience of organized content to the surface so a user can explore your site through these same questions. And then at any time, switch the question that they're exploring. Again, this is ongoing exploration, consent, and the idea that my experience won't get narrower, and at any time I can move out of it and into something else that has been commonly curated for users like me. Finally, one of our favorite examples of something that looks like consent-based calibration is this idea of what we call a kind of user-centered wayfinding tool. UCLA's Extension School has one of the best representations of CVC out there because they have this giant, almost kind of search box on their homepage that says, what do you want to learn? Where do you want to learn it? Online, in class, in a hybrid? And here's what other people have been thinking about. We love this popular links adjustment right next to the search box. And go ahead and get started. All of these experiencers serve the core tenets of consent-based calibration rather than personalization, right? They're not pushing you to do something based on what they've seen you do before. They're revealing, this is what we can offer you. It's exciting. Here's what others have wanted to do. Here's how we've collected content in ways that serve them. Move through them as you see fit. So again, they use motivations to drive action rather than assume interests. They allow users to determine and shift their experience, and they allow people to participate on an ongoing basis in what that experience looks like. So consent-based calibration isn't just this idea of an approach, right? It's also something that has a lot of technical benefits and considerations. ThinkShout is a technical agency, and we want to be able to talk a little bit about how to protect users from the kind of technical perspective as well. So when it comes to personalization, it's a huge technical feat, right? It takes huge machines to be able to actually, and data storage to provide an experience that feels personal to someone, and even that doesn't typically feel personal. There is, of course, client-side behavior tracking, and then there's the server-side data storage. You've got your data analytics on top of that, your machine learning engine behind the scenes trying to figure out what am I gonna pull from all of this data to create a user experience. And then of course, you've got your team building hand-built segments saying, okay, I've noticed all these patterns through these different types of users. Let's build these segments. And then of course you have to maintain them, which takes a huge amount of staff time. For the organizations that ThinkShout serves, that both want to be aligned in values and allow people to have privacy and agency, as well as have limited staff capacity for both updating and maintaining data, the staff time is the biggest reason why consent-based calibration is an incredible alternative to personalization here. Not to mention the liability of having to protect all that data. So again, consent-based calibration from a technical perspective is much lighter. It uses a much lighter touch in terms of what the requirements of data are. Users choose interaction identity, right? So this idea that I can say, okay, I'm an activist today, or a policymaker, or a volunteer, or I'm motivated by learning or discovering or creating, is really helpful, right? You don't have to be guessing every next step. You don't have to be creating a new data profile for every single user that comes in. It uses that browser-side storage, but you're not looking at the same server-side storage lift. You're not looking at dumping a bunch of data into a CRM and guessing from there. You can use query segmentation to create these segments rather than having to hand build segments. And there's no pop-in moment. And what we mean by pop-in moment is anytime you go to a site that has been built by personalization, you always notice, okay, the content's filling in just a second later than my screen has loaded. That's because the machine is trying to figure out what should we give this person rather than just saying, okay, here's what we could give this person. What would they like to choose? That's actually really good. Not having that pop-in moment is also good for like search engine optimization because you can fulfill user intent and not lose somebody with the bounce off the screen. So ultimately, what has to shift when we want to apply consent-based calibration and see more organizations take this approach rather than pushing towards personalization? Well, first of all, ultimately, it's just a mindset shift. It's the idea that being more personal in digital isn't worth it. And in fact, being more reciprocal is. You should be creating such an engaging multi-platform invitation experience that folks don't actually need you to remember exactly who they were all the time. Ask folks, don't tell them, right? So the first thing that needs to shift is don't expect to build a profile for a user that spans weeks or days of site visits. Allow that person to become something different the next time they come back, but provide a high quality experience right off the bat that compels them to do so. And you should also be having other funnels of engagement set up that are just as compelling, like signing up for an email list or following folks on social. And second, you have got to stop feeling ownership over your users' data and start letting them make their own decisions, right? Trust the people who come to your site. Trust yourselves to create an experience that makes it worth coming to your site. Make it clear what your value proposition is. Make it optional to move through your site and to move through the experiences you can provide. And make building trust, ongoing consent, and mutual agency your goal. We believe that it will ultimately pay off. So consent-based calibration, this approach, this new mindset, is hopefully going to help us build better tech for organizations doing good in the world. We would love to continue the conversation with you on Twitter, through thinkshout.com, or anywhere else you'd like to find us. You can ask questions by tagging our handle or tagging me. Again, my name is Kate Lesniak. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at ThinkShout. We're building digital products that put people and the planet first. Thanks so much.